Welcome to the Boxing Gossip channel. Please hit subscribe if you're new. Thank you as always for tuning in. Right, this weekend, Isaac Chamberlain versus Lawrence Okolie. I like this fight. It's been building, it's been simmering for a little bit of time now, and I, for one, have been looking forward to seeing these two guys in the ring. I'm not necessarily going to say it's a 50-50 fight, as I appreciate the public perception and also the bookmaking odds don't display it as a 50-50 fight. Certainly Lawrence Okolie is a substantial favourite with the bookmakers. But let's be fair and say that this is a very, very competitive fight. And regardless of who you think will win, even if you're certain that one of the guys will win, let's agree that there is substantial disagreement with the boxing public and there are strong cases to be made for either guy. Lawrence Okolie, he is the Olympian. He is the more well-known out of the two operators. He is the guy who's regularly considered as a big puncher, certainly a bigger puncher than Isaac Chamberlain. And I guess he's made relatively easy work of the opponents that he's been in with so far in his career. You know, you're sort of certainly yet to see the fight where an opponent has taken substantial rounds off Lawrence Okolie and, you know, look like getting Lawrence Okolie beat. Let's put it that way. And for that reason, Okolie has developed something of a following, and he's known as, you know, one to follow, let's put it that way. Isaac Chamberlain, very much a guy who's flown under the radar. There won't be too many casual boxing fans who have heard of Isaac Chamberlain prior to this matchup with Lawrence Okolie. But to the boxing hardcore, he's a fighter who has developed a little bit of a following. He's probably not the most fashionable fighter in terms of his style. Having watched a few of his fights, he's almost a bit old school in terms of his style. He kind of relies on slickness, reactions. He's not instantly the biggest puncher. You know, he doesn't look as explosive as the Lawrence Okolie. But, you know, you kind of get the perception that he's a young fighter with an experienced head and a coolness and a calmness about him in the ring. And it's kind of an interesting clash of styles seeing these two guys. You've got a clash of styles and you've clearly got a clash of personalities with the fact that there's no love loss, leading to the bill being named British Beef. Very good, Eddie Hearn. So, let's talk about that. When I initially heard this fight was being announced, my initial thought was that I favoured Isaac Chamberlain in the matchup. Now, I've changed my mind on that for reasons I'll go into. But let me tell you how I saw it initially. I saw Lawrence Okolie as the big punching guy who'd got through his opponents too easily and who maybe hadn't been tested enough in the lead up to this fight. I kind of viewed him as quite a raw, amateurish type fighter who relied too much on power and left himself defensively open. I viewed him as the kind of guy who would be coming forward, throwing big bombs, and would be easy to counter, easy to outmaneuver, and possibly easy to outthink in the ring. Looking at Isaac Chamberlain, I thought Chamberlain had substantial advantages in terms of boxing, in terms of skill, and I also thought in terms of experience. I know Chamberlain's a young guy, but he's had more pro fights and he's fought at a much higher level, including a fight that went the distance with Woody Camacho, where he really had to go to the well and prove victorious in very, very difficult circumstances, including a dislocated shoulder. So my initial take was to favour Isaac Chamberlain. I kind of saw Lawrence Okolie coming forward, being a bit wild, being a bit raw, swinging wide shots, throwing bombs, and leaving himself defensively open, where the cool, calm-headed Isaac Chamberlain would see the spots, use his slickness to avoid those wide punches, and counter Okolie down the middle. I kind of, in my head, compared this fight to a Fury-Klitschko type fight. I'm not saying Chamberlain is anywhere near as good as Fury. I'm not saying Okolie is anywhere good as Klitschko. Let's say a poor man's version of it for that fight. I was also making some parallels to like a David Lemieux, Billy Joe Saunders. Now, I appreciate the fighters involved are very different, but that's kind of the look I was getting. I had the David Lemieux being Lawrence Okolie, coming forward, throwing bombs, being a bit wild, getting outmaneuvered, getting countered, and, you know, clearly losing on the cards, etc. The more I've looked into it, the more I've moved away from that opinion, and I actually think my initial reading of the fight was incorrect. I've rewatched footage of both guys, especially Isaac Chamberlain, because he's someone I've watched less, you know, on the way up throughout the professional ranks. Chamberlain one thing I've noticed is, unlike a Billy Joe Saunders or unlike a Tyson Fury, he doesn't use lateral movement to the same extent. He is not a guy who is massively mobile around the width of the ring. He is not a guy who is going to make you chase him necessarily to the same extent and sort of dance around you. He is slick. He's got a lot of like upper body movement. He relies a lot on his reactions. You know, he's quite stylish to look at. But he's not outmaneuvering opponents with his feet. I don't think he's got the feet of a Billy Joe Saunders or of a Tyson Fury. Let's put it that way. So I think what he's kind of going to rely on is almost holding the centre of the ring, or certainly holding his feet at times against against Lawrence Okolie, reading Okolie, and then sort of countering off his work. Or, you know, maybe trying to take the fight to the inside. Maybe he's not going to want to stand there at Lawrence Okolie's range. Okolie appears to be the bigger man and the bigger hitter. Maybe Chamberlain is going to look to bring that fight to the inside, where he has experience and where Lawrence Okolie is somewhat of an untested commodity. And certainly, you know, there's talk about losses Okolie has had in the amateurs and how Chamberlain may be able to replicate that blueprint. I think Okolie has improved, and I think we have seen him start to benefit from the experience of having multiple fights in the professional ranks. I've noticed in his recent fights, he is ever so slightly less raw than he used to be. Most importantly, I've noticed he started to straighten up his punches a little bit. He's a bit less swinging than he used to be in his early fights. He's delivering that jab cross, and he's delivering them straight down the line, and he's doing it a bit faster and a bit snappier. He's bringing the fist back, you know, he's bringing the punch out and bringing it straight back into his guard. And I like that. I think not only is it going to be harder to evade when you've got quicker, straighter, more correctly constructed punches, I also think it leaves him less open defensively. I also think Isaac Chamberlain, whilst Chamberlain is kind of stylish to look at, I think his punches fundamentally lack a snap to them. I don't think he's a big hitter, and I think as his career progresses, we may find out that he's an even lighter puncher than his current KO ratio, which is hardly prolific suggests. If you look at Chamberlain's work, and I appreciate that sometimes you need to be in the ring feeling the punches, simply looking at them isn't enough. But if you look at the punches, sometimes they don't look like the most hurtful punches out there. Now, look, if Isaac Chamberlain hit me, I'm sure I'd go down like a sack of potatoes. But what I'm talking about is, for a guy like Lawrence Okolie, who's super fit, he's big at the weight, you know, I think in comparison, Chamberlain is not a big puncher. And I think that will have two things. Number one, if he counters Lawrence Okolie, I don't think he's got enough in a single punch to sort of time Okolie and get him out of there with one punch. I don't think he's that kind of hitter. Secondly, from a judging perspective, you've got the bigger man in Okolie coming forward, probably being the more active output puncher, landing on Chamberlain. I'm just not sure Chamberlain's work is going to be eye-catching enough for them to score the rounds to him. You know, that's my take on it. Chamberlain does have some advantages in this fight. If he can counter Okolie, he could let Okolie walk onto something. I also believe if the fight goes long, Chamberlain's experience of going to the trenches and going to those late rounds will be extremely beneficial, whereas Lawrence Okolie doesn't have that to anything like the same extent. So Chamberlain is live in this fight. He does have advantages. I believe he has experience advantages and skill advantages in certain areas. But actually looking at making a prediction, I'm going with my head, and I think Lawrence Okolie is going to be able to catch Chamberlain. And I also think if it does go rounds and maybe even goes to the cards, I think the judges are going to be left with the definitive impression that you've got one guy in there who's the bigger guy, the stronger guy, the higher output guy, the bigger hitting guy, and the guy who probably landed the more telling punches. And I think that's Lawrence Okolie. I don't think Chamberlain's style, he's this slick boxer fighter, but I don't think his style will be to use a huge amount of lateral movement and, you know, outbox Okolie on the back foot. I haven't seen that element to his game so far. I don't think his feet are fast enough, and I don't think he lands quite enough offense from the back foot in order to do that. So I actually see Chamberlain holding his feet, or maybe even coming inside the pocket to try and fight Lawrence Okolie. And I think as he does that, hopefully Lawrence Okolie, with the benefit of experience, will continue this transformation, delivering faster, snappier, straighter punches, more correct punches down the middle. And I think if Okolie does that, we'll see that he is he has got a lot more to offer offensively than Chamberlain. And I think he'll either hurt Chamberlain, because Okolie, he's been with a low level of opposition. He does look naturally heavy-handed. But even if he doesn't hurt Chamberlain, even if Chamberlain's got huge punch resistance, I think those shots will be the punches the judges are more likely to remember. Could Chamberlain bring a whole new level to this game and school Okolie? Could he completely make him miss and make him pay? And could I look like an idiot? Very, very possibly. But I think that style works far better as the sort of counterpuncher if you can use the footwork like Fury did against Vladimir, like Billy Joe did against Lemieux. And just watching takes of Chamberlain that I've been doing over the past few days, I'm just not sure he brings that to the same level of those guys. So on balance, I'm going to go with Lawrence Okolie. And if you're looking for a method of victory, I'm going to go Okolie by knockout. I think Chamberlain has his own defensive inefficiencies, and I think he's going to be standing in Okolie's range for long enough in this fight to put himself at risk. I really do. I don't rule out any result here. Chamberlain could win on points. Chamberlain could counter Okolie and catch him. We'll have to see what Okolie's punch resistance is like. That's very untested, and there's reasons from the amateurs that potentially bring that into question. So I'm not ruling out any result. This is not a prediction that I would say is one of the stronger predictions I've made in terms of confidence levels, but I have changed my mind on the fight, and I do think, having reviewed the footage, Okolie is an improving fighter, and his style and the attributes he brings could be enough to see the better of Isaac Chamberlain. I'm looking forward to this fight. I think it's a bit of a gem. Let me know your thoughts. Who are you picking? What do you make of my analysis? Drop your comments in the section below. If you've enjoyed the video, please hit subscribe. If you're new and you haven't already done so, hit subscribe, and always click the thumbs up button. I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for tuning in.